In the quiet Ozark hills of 1882 stood an old wooden inn, its white paint long since grayed by years of rain and wind. Widow Martha Carver lived there alone, running what was once her late husband's pride, Carver's Hill Inn. Her days were filled with silence and the creak of empty floors. Travelers rarely passed the muddy roads now that the new railway ran miles away. Still, she kept the lamps burning, saying, "A light for the lost is a duty of the living." The locals in the nearby town of Ash Hollow spoke of Martha Carver in low voices. Some pitied her for her loneliness, others feared her for her quiet ways. It was said that since her husband's death, she spoke to him every night by the fire, setting a chair for him still. A kind woman, the preacher said once, but haunted by her grief. Few dared to visit the inn after sundown. One November evening, a storm swept through the hills, thunder rolling like distant drums. Around midnight, Widow Carver heard the sound of wagon wheels grinding through the mud, then a knock at her door. When she opened it, 4 travelers stood there, 2 men, a woman, and a boy of about 10. Their clothes were soaked, faces pale with cold. "Ma'am," said the tallest, tipping his hat, "our wagon's wheel broke a mile back. Might you spare us a night's shelter?" She smiled gently. "No soul shall freeze on my porch. Come in." By the hearth, they dried their coats and warmed their hands. The woman, Clara, thanked her softly, while the boy, Eli, clutched a small wooden box to his chest. The 2 men introduced themselves as Mr. Price and Jonas, brothers headed to St. Louis for work. Widow Carver served them stew and cornbread, her own supper untouched. As the wind howled outside, she noticed something strange. All 4 travelers avoided speaking of where they had come from before the storm. She let it be. Travelers often had secrets. Later that night, after the guests retired to their rooms, Martha sat before the fire. Her husband's old chair sat empty beside her. She whispered, "You'd have liked the boy. Reminds me of our Thomas. Their only child had vanished years ago in a flood that swept through the valley. His body was never found. From that day, Martha kept her inn open for any lost soul that came her way, hoping kindness might bring her peace. Around midnight, she woke to the creak of the stairs. The guests were wandering. She rose, candle in hand, and followed the faint sound of whispers. Down in the parlor, the 2 men were speaking in hushed tones. "She keeps a lockbox," Mr. Price muttered. "Probably holds coin." "The old fool lives alone," Jonas hesitated. "She's kind, Henry." "Let it be," but Henry's eyes glimmered greedily. "We've been running too long. One more night, one more score." Martha stepped back, heart sinking. Her kindness had brought wolves to her door. At dawn, Martha found the boy, Eli, sitting by the steps, clutching his wooden box. "You couldn't sleep?" she asked. He shook his head. "Ma'am, do you believe people come back when we miss them hard enough?" She smiled sadly. "Sometimes I feel your heart brings them close. Not in flesh, but in memory." He opened his box just a crack. Inside lay a lock of hair and a faded locket. "It's my sister's," he whispered. "She died last winter." Something in Martha's heart ached, a mother recognizing grief in another soul. By morning, the rain had ceased. The travelers packed their things, thanking her for the night. Henry and Jonas loaded their satchels. Clara smiled kindly, and Eli hugged her waist before leaving. "Safe travels," she said, waving from the porch. But deep down, she feared she'd never see them again. And she was right, though not for the reason she thought. Days passed, then weeks. When Martha rode to town for supplies, she heard Sheriff Dale talking in the general store. 4 folks gone missing on the East Road after the storm. Wagon found near Widow Carver's hill, busted wheel, blood in the mud. Every head turned toward her. The room fell silent. "I fed them supper," Martha said softly. "They left by morning." The sheriff nodded, uncertain. But whispers spread fast. Faster than truth ever could. That night the sheriff came to her inn. "Martha, I need to look around." She let him search every room, every cellar, every cupboard. He found nothing, except her late husband's journal and a small collection of carved wooden toys. "You keep to yourself too much, Martha," he said quietly. "People fill silence with fear." "I keep to myself because kindness can be mistaken for weakness," she replied. A month later, a stranger arrived. A preacher with a letter. He said he'd known Clara and her companions. They weren't travelers, he revealed. They were runaways. Clara was fleeing her husband, the boy her nephew. The brothers, outlaws, seeking redemption. He showed her the letter Clara had written but never sent, thanking the kind widow on the hill for her mercy. Martha clutched it, tears spilling silently. "Then they meant no harm?" she whispered. "Only peace," the preacher said. "They were tired souls." That winter was cruel. Snow buried the roads, and Carver's inn went dark. No guests came, no wagons passed. But sometimes, on the coldest nights, Martha heard faint knocking on her door. Always at midnight. She would open it to find only snow drifting in, and 4 sets of footprints fading into the fog. She began lighting 4 lamps on the porch each night. So no lost soul would stumble in darkness, she said. One night, Martha dreamed she stood in her parlor again, fire glowing softly. Across the room sat her husband, smiling, young as ever. "They found peace, Martha," he said. "How do you know?" she asked. "Because they found you." When she awoke, her pillow was wet with tears. On the hearth, she saw 4 faint boot prints leading to the door, though no one had entered. When the snow thawed, a hunter came to town pale as bone. He said he'd found bones in the woods beyond Widow Carver's inn. 4 graves, carefully covered with stones, with crosses carved from driftwood. The sheriff rode out. The graves were real, but not fresh. They'd been there months, maybe since that stormy night. The strangest thing, each grave held a small token, a locket, a hat, a child's wooden box. Rumor returned with a vengeance. People said the widow had killed them, buried them in secret. Some claimed she fed travelers to her pigs. Others swore they saw ghosts by her windows. One night, a mob marched up the hill with torches. Sheriff Dale stopped them at the gate. "There's no proof," he said. "Let the woman be." But fear is a hard fire to quench. From that day, Widow Carver lived like a ghost herself, shunned by all but the sheriff. Years passed. One autumn, Sheriff Dale, now old and gray, visited her once more. She was frail, her hair silver as frost. "I came to tell you something," he said. "They found a journal in St. Louis. Belonged to Clara. Turns out she'd been dying of consumption. She knew she wouldn't make it far. Her last wish was to rest in the hills." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "So they didn't vanish. They stayed." He nodded. "And whoever buried them did so with care." She whispered, "Then maybe they were never meant to leave." That night, she prepared 4 plates at her table: stew, bread, cider. She lit 4 candles and said softly, "You're welcome home." The air grew still, the flame steady. Some say a warmth filled the room like unseen company had joined her. Later, she was found by the fire, peaceful, a faint smile on her face. The 4 plates untouched but warm. After her passing, townsfolk finally entered the inn. They found her journal on the table. The last page read, "If ever you knock at midnight and the lamps are lit, come in." for there is always room here for the lost, the weary, and the forgotten. From then on, travelers spoke of a faint light glowing at Carver's Hill whenever storms swept through. Some swore they heard laughter and soft music from inside, though the inn had long been abandoned. In 1903, a man arrived in Ash Hollow, a middle-aged carpenter named Eli Turner. He carried a wooden box and said he'd once stayed at Widow Carver's inn as a boy. "She saved my life," he told the townsfolk, "fed us when no one else would." He visited the ruins of the inn and found 4 small crosses still standing under an old oak. Beside them lay a 5th, new and freshly carved, with the name Martha Carver. Eli knelt and wept. He rebuilt the porch steps himself and hung a small lantern that burned every night. To this day, locals say that when storms roll through the Ozarks, a faint glow appears atop the hill. 5 lights now, swaying gently in the wind. Travelers who lose their way sometimes report a warm inn with flickering candles, an old woman by the hearth offering stew, and the soft laughter of unseen guests. But when they return to town to thank her, there's nothing there but mist and the faint smell of bread baking. They call it the widow's light, a sign that kindness, once given from a grieving heart, never truly dies. It simply finds its way home.